Alright, welcome back, and it is time to do the version 2.5 performance test. Now, I did wait for maybe 2 or 3 days just in case if Kuro does release a small update, a patch that potentially solves some of the ongoing problems, and that's exactly what happened. A small update was released and the Vulkan option was expanded to several different chipsets, and the Vulkan option finally appeared on my S25 on the 8 Elite. Now, besides the 8 Elite, Vulkan is officially available on the Dimensity 9400, and surprisingly, it became available on multiple Exynos chips, starting from Exynos 2200 and above, which is actually something that I didn't really see coming, and I'm actually very happy that Exynos did get some love from Kuro, because those chipsets have very powerful GPUs that even to this day suffered from not being utilized to the fullest because of the API. Now, here on screen you can actually see how much RAM the game was using, and this is from this test and from my gameplay session that I've done today, basically without recording, but just just basically just playing around. And the game does use about 5.6 gigabytes of RAM, or maximum usage 5.6 gigabytes of RAM, which is actually quite the big amount of RAM that this game does use. Now the difference is that's done on the custom configuration file, which is by default. This is the first test here. Actually, this current picture that you're looking at here was taken after playing with the custom configuration file, basically, which is how I usually play the game, because of the better visuals, and overall the game just looks very good. But 5.6 gigabytes of RAM is the highest usage that I've seen from Wuthering Waves. Which isn't a small number. I think so far that's the highest amount of RAM that I've seen any game use so far on this platform. So that is kind of impressive, and I have like 10 more gigabytes to spare, so I have a lot of room for that. But let's start with the test, and let's see how 2.5 will perform. Now, today's test will be a little bit different. I will basically go swap from OpenGL to Vulkan on the same bus, on the same area, and that will kind of give us a interesting overall image and picture of how both of these APIs work and what frame rate and stability we will get. Now, first let me actually go and show you the new stuff with the update, and let me also show you the settings. Now first, let me show you the settings, because that's the most important part here. Everything will be set on maximum as usual. There is the Vulkan option, there is the frame generation. In the future, ray tracing will appear in the advanced tab here as well. That's the next big thing that Kuro will add for mobile device ray tracing. I can't wait to see that happen, which is going to happen definitely at this moment. Undeniable, it will happen. And here is the little update. Snapdragon 8 Elite, Dimensity 9400 and Exynos 2200 and above. So Exynos models got the largest Vulkan expansion here from what we see here. Obviously, you can still easily enable Vulkan if you like through the device profile INI and through the engine INI. If your device doesn't support Vulkan, well, if the game doesn't let you switch to Vulkan, you can still do that through the engine INI and through the device profile INI, as we have seen in the previous videos. Very easy to do. In this case, I think this is the first video that I'll be doing without actually having to swap, having to actually do anything in the engine in your device properly to actually get Vulkan to work. So this kind of helps at making the whole test, I guess, easier and maybe faster. Now, you might be wondering, okay, what is the best looking area that you can go to and test the game and fun out? Well, it's this area. This area grew on me. This place is absolutely gorgeous and tied in with the story as well. This place is just beautiful, both visually and both story-wise. Even though the overall backstory of this area is a little bit dark, it is visually stunning. Oh, and Forlova is here. That's lovely. Okay, I was wondering where she is. I've been looking for her the whole day, and she wasn't here. She just popped in when I started recording. Beautiful. Okay, now we know where she is. Okay. I'll come back to this area at the end of the video with the custom configuration, just so I can show you the game, the visuals in the highest possible quality on a mobile device, which will be running at 4 times above 1080p. It should be, based on the configuration that is set. Now let's do some boss battles first. The test is officially starting. First, as I mentioned before, we will start with OpenGL, and then on the same boss we will swap quickly to Vulkan, and then we will also do OpenGL 60, OpenGL 120 FPS, Vulkan 60 and Vulkan 120 FPS. All of that will be tested out today, and let the test begin. Now, the thing with OpenGL that I've noticed on the 8 Elite so far in the previous version updates, OpenGL did seem to give a little bit more FPS, but at the same time it was also giving away a little bit more heat. Now, in 2.4, Vulkan is getting about the same FPS as OpenGL now. However, maybe randomly you might notice some random freeze, a freeze frame or something like that. Might happen occasionally. But besides that, Vulkan is pretty much running really good now, and I'm actually I'm not surprised at the release of Vulkan now. It seems to be actually ready to be used and ready to be released, because I have little to no complaints about Vulkan anymore in this game. You get decent thermals, you also do get overall a more stable gameplay experience, which is the thing that I've tried to show for over a year, and finally I guess the hard work paid off at the end. I'm happy with having Vulkan option in the game. Now, 120 FPS, we did get to 99, 100 degrees Celsius. It's important to note that the red temperatures there are hotspots, basically. The GPU hotspot is the GPU is only the hotspot, because the overall average GPU temperature is on the blue window on top. The CPU temperature, the package of the CPU temperature, is also on that little gray window, but the GPU over there is just hotspot temperature, basically the hottest part of the chipset. So let's go and swap to Vulkan. Now, in order to swap to Vulkan, you basically have to reboot the game, which is what I personally have anticipated, that it will work this way. And as we have talked in the past, the game will not force you to run Vulkan. You do have an option, which is basically the exact thing I talked about in the past, before Vulkan was a thing. Basically what I said in, I don't know how many videos ago, I said that Vulkan shouldn't be forced. It should basically be an optional thing that players should be able to enable. and this is exactly what Kuro did give us. Now, the question will be, well, why did they decide to add Vulkan so quickly all of a sudden? I feel like feedback is the real cause for that. And I think I've done enough tests, honestly, with a lot of different games. Not just Wuthering Waves, but other games with Vulkan. And I think the OpenGL versus Vulkan tests are definitely, have definitely been important, because they really do show the advantage of Vulkan that we would get. And I'm happy that finally, after a while, we did get Vulkan support. So I'm going Vulkan fully. I'm not swapping back to OpenGL anymore. I'm staying Vulkan. It's just the much better API. Now, we are on 60 FPS Vulkan, and surprisingly we did get roughly about the same temperatures as with OpenGL, 120 FPS, which is pretty funny because Vulkan with 120 FPS is actually giving less heat than Vulkan with 60 FPS. So I feel like Kuro has been testing out Vulkan a lot with frame generation primarily, and that's just, what I personally would say from the numbers that I'm seeing here, which is fine. If they did initially intend this to be used with the 8 Elite, for example, then it is understandable that they would definitely try to work with frame generation, and they would definitely want to get that to work with frame generation primarily. It's the thing that the 8 Elite does on this game, has frame generation, although it is not really only locked to the 8 Elite. You can easily enable that too, by the way, if you want. Through the engine INI, you can enable frame generation on pretty much any device that runs Android. So that's a huge win for the platform, I guess, because the ease of access to get these advanced features is incredible, and I'm glad that it's allowed to be randomly enabled like that. Not many games do that. Actually, is there any other game of this type, of this genre basically, that allows us to enhance the game to such an extent to basically enable features that are usually locked for specific device on mobile? I don't think any other game does that. I'm fairly sure no other game does that actually at the moment. If there is any game that does that, feel free to let me know. So let's swap back to OpenGL and let's see how the next boss will perform. Next boss will be Hecate, and fun thing that also is noticeable on the starting menu. If you launch with Vulkan, you get 120 FPS on the main menu screen for some odd reason. On OpenGL you get 30, so the Vulkan does have a couple bugs here and there, although I wouldn't be sure if I can call them bugs, because the overall smoothness on the login screen, for example, with Vulkan is noticeable from 30 FPS, a insane difference in smoothness, which is to be expected. So, and obviously besides that, you will still see the FPS. Well, how do I call it? The FPS line, I guess. You see the thing that goes up and down, right? The blue and red thing there, the lines that portray the utilization of the CPU and the frame rate and the GPU. Well, on Vulkan they have these little ups and downs, as I like to call them, the spiking. That's pretty much what it does look like, because it creates spikes with the line. That is also kind of a rendering bug, I believe. However, you will not notice that rendering bug unless you monitor the FPS like I am. So that directly does not affect the FPS, does not affect the gameplay, and it does not affect the game stability, at least from my experience. However, it does indicate that there might be some bugs, some maybe driver errors or something like that in the background, which may actually contribute to some of the freeze frames, occasional freeze frames, and or occasional small FPS drops. Could be related to that. I don't personally know. That is something that Kuro could look at, and if there is something regarding that, could be solved. So that's just, I guess, the only little complaint I would have on Vulkan at the moment. It's not really a complaint, it's just something very interesting that I noticed testing, and this is something that's been ongoing since I think 2.4. In 2.3 the frame rate and the utilization monitor didn't do that. It had a stable line, but starting from 2.4 it basically started to do that. To me, for unknown reasons, but the FPS is definitely much better now on Vulkan. It is 60 and 120 FPS respectively, depending on what option you choose. So let's go and do the Hecate boss with 120 FPS. Overall, these temperatures that you're seeing here are internal temperatures, and while they seem high and they seem, maybe seem scary, there is no need to be worried about such temperatures, because the 8 Elite's maximum thermal threshold before throttling is 105 degrees Celsius. Now, throttling can occur even before that, depending on how long and depending on what temperature it's been running, because if the device itself does get warm after a couple hours of playing games, then it will throttle even below 105 degrees Celsius. But if you are able to keep the device down, and if the temperature is also 105 degrees Celsius, then the throttling will occur based on the chip temperature. So you do occasionally see one type of throttling, and then you can also experience the other type of throttling. The most important thing to note here is that throttling can happen from two factors: CPU or the overall phone body temperature. In my case, usually CPU throttling because of the phone being usually cold, because I use coolers and stuff like that. But most devices will throttle based on how warm the hull itself gets warm. And I actually thought that that's not really the case, but you do get two types of throttling depending on what gets warmer first. Usually, actually, I would say maybe CPU throttling is actually the most common one, depending on what you do with your device. But that is something that I guess I would have to test out to see for myself, which I will be doing next time, I guess, in one of the other videos perhaps. So it is time to go and swap back to Vulkan, and it will be time to see how Vulkan will act with this current boss that we have. Okay, everything seems to be in place. Vulkan on. Frame generation will be turned on after the 60 FPS battle first. Now overall, you also have to keep in mind that I'm recording screen because I just wanted to show you guys a overall better image, because I know the camera that I use here, it's a very weird angle. I personally don't really like to record just the phone. I like to show the whole screen, because that's just the better thing to do. So I just recorded both the screen and phone, and then I just compile it, to have both on the screen at the same time. But you have to keep in mind that my recorder does eat like 20-25% of CPU or GPU, so it does contribute a little bit to the heat And I noticed that when I was basically trying the frame generation with the custom configuration file, and that thing ate resources like, I don't know, my recorder just loves to do that. It's pretty weird, but the recorder that I'm using right now is also, I would say, one of the best ones because it just offers so many options, quality options, a lot of other things that just work really well for recording videos like this, and I really don't plan to change my recorder anytime soon. It does have its drawbacks, but you know, for what it is, it's actually doing a insane amount of good work. Well, the temperatures seem a little bit down this time around with Vulkan, as to be expected. The overall Vulkan FPS is, for the most part, for the most part, really, I would say, really stable. I mean, I'm also basing that on my older previous tests because the previous tests definitely showed Vulkan giving less frame rate than OpenGL, but at the same time drastically less heat. And maybe in the later versions of the game, 2.4, 2.5, maybe Vulkan actually did get a little bit more on the warm side when it comes to the heat output. So maybe that has changed a little bit. It's not as bad as OpenGL heating, that's for sure, but you may notice that the overall temperatures with Vulkan seem a little bit higher than before, but at the same time the frame rate is also higher than before. So these are the interesting little findings that I noticed from testing Vulkan performance starting from 2.2 or 2.3 up until 2.5. Overall, I am happy, obviously. I think you guys will also benefit from having Vulkan as well. I mean, you can test out OpenGL and Vulkan and see what works best. But from my experience, Vulkan definitely almost always offered better thermals and better stability in pretty much all the games that I played. Now, there are some examples of Vulkan-based games that don't run well, and that's primarily because of bad Vulkan implementation and overall just better optimization that's done by those developers. Now, thankfully, Kuro did their job really well, so I can say that for this game. This game does run Vulkan really well so far, better than before. There is a good overall improvement in Vulkan FPS, in thermals and in everything, if we compare it from the previous versions of the game that we have had the chance to play. Maybe all improvements, but thermals, because I honestly think that Vulkan in 2.5 and 2.4 did heat up a little bit more than Vulkan in 2.3. But that's just my experience from my testing. Now we will do the second part of the test. Basically, same thing. OpenGL 60, OpenGL 120 FPS, and then Vulkan 60, and then Vulkan 120 FPS. I will go and run through some of the new areas of the Septimon map. Basically, I realized that action, basically running in an open space, open field very quickly, from one point to the other point, basically just running through the whole map, does seem taxing on the hardware, and we want to see how the multicore will handle, how multicolor Vulkan will handle the overall game, and how the OpenGL will do the same thing. Basically, we want to look at the temperature. So if I repeat a word 1,000 times, my apologies for that. All of a sudden my blood sugar just dropped. I'm a little bit lazy to go grab something to eat, so I'm also trying to kind of you know how it goes when the blood sugar drops. Happens to me often for some odd reason, but it happened just now. So if I do appear all of a sudden a little bit different, it's because of that. But I'll survive, hopefully, maybe. If you see this video, I survive. Anyway, I also tried to match the scenery, the overall lighting and the time, because I believe some of the effects, lighting and stuff like that does affect performance. I want to make sure that the map and everything is at the exact same time of the day, so that when I run from point A to point B, that we get the most exact and the most, let's say, comparable and accurate test. Now, I was talking about what games, for example, have bad Vulkan implementation. Well, Zenless Zone Zero and Honkai Star Rail both are running in Vulkan, but the overall performance and FPS that you get in these games doesn't really match the visuals of the game. And I actually need to go and test both games out. I need to download and test them to see what the problem is. But I've seen a lot of tests myself. I've had friends who told me the same thing, that there is a lot of stuttering and frame drops going on in these games. So I kind of want to go and do the same test with these games to see what the problem is, and you know, maybe do the same feedback and maybe get those games and maybe get the performance on those games up, which is pretty much what we have accomplished with Wuthering Waves. I think us, the player, we the players, giving feedback to Kuro actually gave us such an amazing game. And this is the little part where I usually say thank you, Kuro, for actually getting Vulkan in the game, and thank you, Kuro, for listening. You will have my support. I mean, I already kind of buy stuff in the game, so they did get my support for a very long time now. But I do really like these developers. They're making masterpieces of games. They put the game first, actually, which is what a game studio should actually do. Player first, game first, and that's what we are seeing from Kuro. They got my trust, and I think most of us will probably say the same thing. Okay, well, those were some interesting thermals. I was with OpenGL. It wasn't too bad, actually. Decent thermals. We get some decent thermals here, even on OpenGL. And let's do some boss. Let's do some boss battles as well, because why not? Since we do have two bosses in Septimon here, let's just quickly wipe the floor with them, and then we will go 120 FPS, and then we will do the same thing with Vulcan, because I just want to see the difference in thermals. Overall, I mean, considering the fact that the 8 Elite isn't really shy on drawing power, it's no secret that this is primarily a performance-oriented chip. I think this might very well be one of the first actual performance-oriented chips that don't really care about power draw, but only care about performance. And that's why the overall thermal limit has been raised on this thing, and that's why they made the 8 Elite withstands 105 degrees Celsius. I've tested out so far, ever since I was involved with content creation, I've tested out maybe 7 or 8 different phones, and all of them always throttled. Some throttle at 75, some throttle at 80, 95, the 8 Gen 2 throttles at 95, for example. This is the first chip that I had the chance to see throttling at, and actually not throttling at, over 100 degrees Celsius. It goes full speed at 100 degrees Celsius, so this is absolutely a performance-oriented chip that sacrifices a little bit of efficiency and does sacrifice a little bit of I guess, well, it doesn't sacrifice, it actually adds a little bit more heat as well, but it gains an enormous amount of performance, and I'm personally fine with that, because this is pretty much the chip that I personally would need, and the chip that I am using myself. So while it might not be ideal for all users, for all players, if you want performance, yeah, this thing will definitely give you that. And at the moment it knocks everything out of the water on in the mobile world of chips. It just defeats everything basically. So as someone mentioned in the past, the 8 Elite is the 4090 moment for mobile basically, and I have to agree. That's pretty much what I felt when I took this thing out for the first time, and when I tested this game out for the first time. I was blown away by how stupidly fast this thing is. Anyway, time to go and swap to Vulkan, and then we will repeat the same little running test, and we will do the bosses with 60 and with 120 FPS, obviously. Actually, my apologies. I almost messed up here. We still have to do the 120 FPS run, and then maybe the boss battles, maybe not. Depends on what I am. Depends what I'm doing with the game here. But overall, funny results for 2.5 so far. Vulkan on 60 FPS is emitting about the same amount of heat as OpenGL on 120 FPS, or close to it. OpenGL on 60 FPS emits about the same heat. Actually, OpenGL on 120 FPS emits much less heat. OpenGL on 120 FPS emits a lot more heat than Vulkan on 120 FPS. So we do have some very interesting results here. Basically, 60 FPS plus OpenGL at the moment, at least on the 8 Elite, would mean less heat on the chipset. But 60 FPS with Vulkan on 8 Elite seems to be giving a little bit more heat. But I also feel like the performance has been a little bit better. So that's a very interesting result. But definitely what I would consider the most interesting result is that Vulkan 120 FPS does seem to be better thermal-wise, temperature-wise, than OpenGL 60 and 120 FPS. So that's just what my conclusion would be. Not exactly a conclusion, total conclusion. I mean, there's going to be a lot more tests, obviously, but it is very funny how software works, really. And 120 FPS would still get warm, don't get me wrong, obviously, but the overall thermal spread, I would say, seems to be slower and less, which is interesting, which is definitely interesting. Of course, these tests are also kind of based on my previous test that I did not release, because when I did the last test, I actually did make a video before this video, and I did upload it, but the second I wanted to click upload and publish, I saw a little update, and I logged in the game and I saw the window appearing. Again, before the little mini update, I didn't have the switch, basically. I had to go in the engine INI and turn the Vulkan on manually. So that was pretty funny to experience. But time to swap to Vulkan, and let's go to see how Vulkan will handle the game in that particular scenario, in that particular area. So far, your feedback has been very valuable to me, because I'm pretty happy to help you guys with getting better overall experience with the game. I'm here to test things out, to see what works, what doesn't work, and trying to basically see what's the best possible settings, or the best possible thing to do with the game to get good performance. Because I believe Wuthering Waves and few other games are one of the very rare few examples of developers actually not treating Android like a afterthought. I mean, I don't want to go too deep into this. I think we all know by now that the other open world game, uh, while it does look much, how to say that without being, how to say this without actually, how to say this in a polite way, you know, it's difficult, honestly. I try to be as honest as possible, but at the same time, I don't want to be too negative towards any game. I want to be critical, and I want to be logical when I compare games or when I just give feedback on games. But I personally feel the other game, the other open world game from 2020, could have done much better performance-wise, visually as well. I think we can all agree on that. I'm talking about the game 5 years later after release, still not having Vulkan support. Actually, the chances of Vulkan appearing in that game is practically zero, because you used to be able to kind of force Vulkan on that game in the past, but unfortunately you can't anymore because it's been removed. Why would anyone do that? That's beyond me, but I'm not surprised based on the developer of that certain game that shall not be named, as I usually say. Visually speaking, I think I think I think anyone looking at both of these games will realize, you know, I don't think I need to mention anything here right now when it comes to visuals and graphics. Wuthering Waves is, at the moment, visually speaking, aesthetically speaking, actually aesthetics can differ. That's fine. Our style can differ, but overall, detail-wise, texture-wise, graphics-wise, effect-wise, animation-wise, everything that goes into the technical details is the best-looking game on this platform, and it's also the best running game on this platform. You know, it is scary that this game with such visual fidelity, I mean, it's undeniable, the game looks nice. It used to run poorly, let's also be honest here, let's not forget the poor start that we have seen in the past. It used to run poorly, but update by update it's getting better and better, which is, I would say, the most important thing, because developers actually fixing the game to make it run better is welcomed. The other game that I might go and maybe do a side by side comparison, I don't know, but the other game, visually speaking, had I believe no improvements. Like, it's still blurry, very low resolution, you can't manually increase the resolution. I mean, it runs like 30-40 FPS on 8 Elite without using GPU, without using anything. OpenGL, yikes. So it's pretty sad when you look at that. But, you know, we have Wuthering Waves here absolutely dominating currently. So, yeah, I mean, it's very easy. I am with the game that treats my device and that treats me in a positive way. Wuthering Waves and Kuro did treat me and did treat the player base in a very nice way. Well, with the exception of the last main story, which I believe we can all agree that was a little sad, but the story was beautiful. All jokes aside, you know, the story was beautiful, and I'm definitely looking for more. But, well, in all seriousness, I believe Kuro's definitely been treating us as players really well. So I'm going to be playing Grey Raven and Wuthering Waves for a very long time. I love the games, I love the developer team and Kuro in general, so one of the very few rare developers that I can actually say that to. that I can actually say that I actually like their games and that I actually like the developer team itself. Well, these are some interesting thermals. We are on 120 FPS and we are on Vulkan. Interesting results nonetheless. I also have to mention that I did have little breaks between testing, because obviously I want to make sure that the temperatures are also equal when I start, so that there is no, let's say OpenGL makes the phone nuclearly warm, right? It makes the phone like go full reactor mode, and then I open Vulkan and then, you know, it lags. I made sure that both had a equal temperature start. I made sure that both APIs had the same temperature, the same overall situation, and that way I can ensure that the results are as accurate as possible. And you might be wondering, okay, why are you using like 50 different applications? Honestly, I'm using these applications because they don't affect performance. Primarily, that's the primary reason. They don't affect performance. They are very accurate. When I say very accurate, they show the exact temperatures and overall utilizations, frequencies and stuff like that. Because I've seen and I've tested multiple applications and a lot of them seem to, for some odd reason, just clog the CPU core 7 and 8 particularly, the two supermassive cores that this device has, leading to a lot of throttling, a lot of lag, and leading to results that are not accurate. That's pretty much why I'm using the applications that I have on screen. They're working, they're accurate, and they don't affect performance, which is the most important aspect of a performance test. You want the game to be the one and only thing taxing the hardware. You don't want a external application also taking resources. It definitely will have an impact on the result of the FPS test. Well, that was fast. I definitely destroyed that boss. So far, you know, it is very close. Again, I'm sticking with Vulcan myself. You can stay with OpenGL if you like. You can stay with Vulcan if you like. This test is kind of to show the performance of the two APIs, the strengths of the APIs. Although honestly, if we look purely by technology, if we look purely by code, basically, if you look at what is generally more performant, OpenGL or Vulkan, there is pretty much no reason to use OpenGL anymore, especially since Vulkan allows ray tracing, allows a lot of other things that OpenGL doesn't really support. So from the logical standpoint, from the technological standpoint, going with Vulkan is a no-brainer. But at the same time, if you have an older device, for example, or maybe, you know, sometimes it may happen that Vulkan may have some bugs and stuff, it's good to have a backup option. It is good to have an option in general. So I'm actually happy that we get to pick whether we want OpenGL or Vulkan. That is what I want more to see in the game, more options with settings. And Kuro is starting to deliver that. So again, one more proof that those surveys, that the feedbacks and stuff like that does affect the overall game result. Because obviously the developer will listen and solve and improve issues, improve the game and solve issues. No. Well, I think we have finally managed to get this little device to throttle. We're at about 100 FPS now, but temperatures are definitely not in the throttling threshold. So yeah, I definitely did manage to get this thing to throttle after after maybe more than an hour of playing, after an hour of brutally testing out the device, from swapping from APIs left and left, back and forth, it is understandable if it decided to drop FPS a little bit at the end, which is again a very interesting result. But honestly, so far, Vulkan performance, considering the fact how it performed in the last two versions, this is a huge improvement. And obviously makes sense that it will be a huge improvement. They have officially released it for some devices. Now you might wonder, okay, is this going to be only for the highest of highest end flagships? As I mentioned before, it is not locked for the highest of highest end flagships. You can manually turn on Vulkan easily through the engine ini and through the device profiling, but can you expect Vulkan to show up naturally in the settings, and can you expect naturally to turn it on from the settings? Yes, I'm fairly sure that that's going to be that's their goal. I feel like they are doing optimization chipset by chipset, although I'm a little bit I don't want to say that I feel guilty that the 8 Elite got it first, I guess, because after all, when I started to give feedback on Vulkan, I did give feedback on the 8 Elite primarily, first on the 8 Elite, because that's when I got this device, and when I bought this device, that's around the time when Vulkan was actually kind of sneakily added into the game. And that's when I started to be a little bit more serious with the feedback and with the service and with stuff like that. So I don't know. In general, it's a very interesting thing to think of. But we are nearing the end of the video. I wanted to end the video with the custom configuration file, because why not? I want to show you the new area with some improved visuals. Now, when I say improved visuals, there are some things that I believe Kuro can improve more, and they did improve lighting in 2.5 on mobile. I feel like graphics in general on mobile will definitely be improved a lot more. If you want to improve the graphics manually, you can definitely, I mean, it's very easy to just do this, and I think I've been using a custom configuration file since 1.3 or 1.4. That's a long time ago. So far, no issues with that. This is all within engine level, so it is something that comes with Unreal Engine 4, basically. So there is that thing to keep in mind. And I have a bunch of options. I have a bunch of different configuration files there, all different, all have something that the other doesn't. Basically, it's me playing around with this is just a thing that I really do enjoy, and it's fun. Now let's boot up the game and let's see the visuals. I will actually do something very, very funny and maybe very stupid in one of the next videos. I will do the same custom configuration on... I will basically use the same custom configuration on my tablet, which is a Snapdragon 870 tablet with a enormous display resolution. It's I think 3K display. I will do the same resolution on that thing, and I will make a screenshot. I really want to see how beautiful this game will look on such a screen. It's a 11-inch display, big one. So I really want to see how good the image will look on that. The frame rate will be 1 FPS, I know, but I really want to see how the game will look. I actually set the game to download tonight, and I just copy paste the assets into the folder. It will be very quickly, actually. But let's enjoy the visuals a little bit. I mean, honestly, This runs on a phone, by the way. I believe art style and overall color and stuff like that does make a game look really good without having to actually be very taxing on the hardware. Now this is running at 4x 1080p resolution, which is what I usually play with on this device. It does count as super sampling, so basically it does render the high resolution and then it downsamples it back to 1080p so that it does fit the display, resulting with overall much better visuals and overall much better details. This just looks amazing, beautiful. This is just a very fun, very beautiful map, and that's just how I wanted to end the video for today. So, OpenGL versus Vulkan. Vulkan definitely much better than before, no denying it. I'm very happy that Exynos is getting some love here because Exynos GPUs are very strong and very good. The problem with Exynos GPUs is that optimization is not really working for them, and I believe Vulkan on a Exynos is going to run much better now than it should be. Should run much better than before. Are there some bugs? Yeah, some little frame dips here and there. The spikes that you see there on top of the screen in the FPS and with the usages there, that's also a little problem, but nothing that is, completely game breaking or anything like that. FPS is now actually above 60 plus FPS, or with Vulkan used to be actually lower, about 50, 49, 50, but that's solved. In general, Vulkan has entered a stage where it's definitely going to be the better option that we can pick, and I would say the option that I would personally recommend to pick. But with that being said, we are nearing the end of the video. Hope you guys have enjoyed this little test. Hope you guys enjoy this type of testing. I try to be as accurate, as transparent as possible with these tests, and I try to show you pretty much everything that's happening under the hood of these devices. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe, and with that being said, stay safe. As always, I'll see you next time, and I hope that we see Forlova in the story next time, because I would love to see her back, and this time ending the story with some good relations with Thrower.